The vast and unyielding expanse of the Galactic Empire stretched across countless star systems, each ruled by an iron grip that no force could shake. Emperor Sadrath sat upon his throne within the spire of Anarath, the capital world, his golden robes shimmering in the light of 1,000 suns, his mind always calculating the next move, his gaze always fixed on his grand empire, a machine of powers so immense that it seemed eternal, the galaxy bent to his will, or so it seemed. Whispers began to spread from the farthest reaches of space, rumors that made their way through the shadowy corners of the Imperial courts, whispers about a species no one had ever heard of, a species called humans. Their fleet was said to be approaching, yet no one seemed to believe it. Not at first. They laughed off the stories as the ravings of frightened soldiers, or the wild imaginings of isolated colonies. But as the weeks passed, the rumors grew louder, more detailed, the stories of battles fought with strange tactics and weapons, unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered, fleets that appeared from nowhere and vanished before Imperial forces could even respond. It was said that the humans were unlike any species the Empire had ever encountered. They did not fight like the other alien races. They did not follow the Empire's rules of war. They did not fear death. They were relentless, adaptable, and cunning. They fought with a fury that could not be explained. Their ships had weapons that shattered Imperial armor like it was paper. Their tactics seemed to defy the very laws of warfare. Their very presence unsettled even the most battle-hardened soldiers of the Empire, and still the Emperor was unconcerned. The rumors meant nothing to him. In the grand scale of his empire, he had seen thousands of species rise and fall. They all crumbled beneath the might of his rule. The humans would be no different. And yet, as the weeks turned into months, reports from the farthest frontier systems began to trickle in. Imperial ships began to disappear, entire fleets simply vanishing without a trace. At first, it was thought to be the work of pirates. But when a long-range communication was intercepted, it painted a different picture. The transmission was garbled, but certain words were clear enough: human fleet, and incoming, followed by the scream of an officer. The transmission ended abruptly, and no one could explain it. The Emperor's advisors gathered in secret and whispered of a new force in the galaxy, an unknown enemy that was not to be underestimated. But Sadrath was resolute. He would not let fear cloud his judgment. A few skirmishes with minor fleets was nothing compared to the power he commanded. They were just another species to be crushed like all the others. So he ignored the warnings and continued with his lavish life, his endless celebrations of conquest and grandeur. But deep inside his mind, something stirred as reports from the edge of Imperial space grew more disturbing. The humans were no longer just rumors. They were becoming a reality. But the Emperor dismissed the threat with a wave of his hand. A new force had arrived in the galaxy, but as the human shadow loomed closer, the Empire had yet to realize just how far-reaching that shadow would be, and how soon they would be forced to confront it. The first sign that the Empire's perception of its dominance was flawed came in the remote sectors of the galaxy where no Imperial fleet had dared venture in years. A scout ship, an old vessel used for routine patrols, was dispatched to investigate the reports of a strange fleet on the edge of known space. The captain of the ship, a seasoned officer named Captain Silva, had seen everything in her years of service, but the strange coordinates she was given felt unsettling. There was no sign of enemy ships or fleets in the region, just a mysterious black void hanging in the stars like a wound in the fabric of the galaxy. She took her orders seriously, but something in her gut told her that this mission was more than just another routine sweep. As the scout ship entered the empty void, the sensors began to pick up something. Faint but growing stronger by the moment, a signal burst through the silence, an unexpected transmission from a distant human ship, no more than a blip on the radar. But it was there. For a moment, Captain Silva thought it was just interference. But then the ship appeared out of nowhere. It was massive, unlike anything she had seen before. It seemed to materialize from the very fabric of space itself. The human vessel was sleek and angular, with strange glowing accents across its surface. It did not match the patterns of any known ship design in the Empire. Before she could issue a command to move in closer, the human ship fired. The weapon hit with incredible precision, a single blast that cracked the hull of the scout ship like an eggshell. The ship shook violently, and alarms blared across the bridge as panic set in. The crew scrambled to respond. The human vessel launched a series of coordinated strikes, each more devastating than the last. The scout ship was outmatched, its defense systems powerless against the unexpected assault. Selva ordered an immediate retreat, but it was too late. The human ship tracked their every movement, as though it could predict their actions. The escape route collapsed into a deadly web of fire from the pursuing enemy ship. The scout ship exploded in a final fiery gust. The reports of the skirmish were quickly transmitted back to Imperial command. The destruction of a fleet so easily, so swiftly, was something the Empire could not ignore. A small group of Imperial ships was immediately dispatched to the area to investigate the human fleet's capabilities. Yet, as they approached the region where the scout ship had been destroyed, the humans were waiting. The Imperial ships were not even allowed the luxury of a first strike. The human fleet moved with terrifying speed and precision. In a matter of moments, the Imperial forces were outmaneuvered and cut to pieces. At first, the Imperial commanders believed it to be a fluke, a miscalculation, or a surprise attack by rogue factions. But soon enough, more encounters unfolded. The humans were not retreating. They were advancing with every battle. They grew bolder and more ruthless. Their ships were smaller than the Empire's warships, but their firepower was devastating. Each ship worked in perfect unison, like a single mind, directing the chaos of war. Their tactics were utterly unpredictable and terrifyingly efficient. The humans seemed to understand the very essence of combat, how to exploit weaknesses in the Empire's seemingly invincible forces. One by one, Imperial fleets were destroyed or forced to flee. The human ships operated like phantoms, never fully appearing on sensors until it was too late. Their weaponry was strange, silent, and deadly, but accurate, as though designed to break the Empire's technological superiority in a single strike. And always, they disappeared before Imperial reinforcements could arrive, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. As reports flooded in, the Empire began to understand the scope of the disaster unfolding. The humans were not just attacking. They were conquering. At first, small outlying planets fell to them, with no sign of resistance. The humans took control of systems that had long been thought impenetrable by anyone other than the Empire. Yet no one truly understood what drove these invaders. These humans had no reason to invade, no desire for power or resources. They fought for something far more elusive than wealth or control. The humans fought for survival, and that made them an unstoppable force. Back on Anorath, Emperor Sadrath could no longer ignore the truth. He had seen enemies come and go, but this was different. These humans were unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. The galaxy was no longer a playground for the Empire's power. The humans were coming, and they would stop at nothing until they had claimed everything. The Empire's control over the galaxy had been built on centuries of conquest and dominance, an iron rule that had crushed countless enemies who dared oppose them. Emperor Sadrath, in his towering palace on Anorath, had always prided himself on his strategic genius and unshakable command over the vast empire. But the reports flooding in from the front lines of the human conflict were unsettling, and for the first time in his reign, Sadrath began to feel the grip of fear tighten around him. These humans, this mysterious force that had swept across the Empire's borders, were unlike any species he had ever faced. Their tactics were unorthodox, their technology unpredictable, and their resolve unbreakable. His advisors, usually quick to downplay any threat, now spoke with urgency. General Kryn, one of the Empire's most trusted commanders, was the first to voice what many were thinking. "We cannot ignore them, Your Majesty. This is not a simple rebellion, not a border skirmish. The humans are organized, relentless, and they are advancing faster than we anticipated. They are taking entire systems, worlds we thought secure, and they do so with military precision." Sadrath's face, usually cold and impassive, showed the faintest trace of concern. He had crushed rebellions, quelled uprisings, and defeated alien forces that had once seemed insurmountable. But the humans were something different. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You speak of them as though they are some unstoppable force, but they are mere mortals. If they can be destroyed, I will destroy them." He turned to his fleet commanders, who were seated in rows before him, each more worried than the last. "We will do what we always do," Sadrath continued. "We will show them the might of the Empire. Bring me their heads." But even as he spoke, a sense of doubt lingered in the air, unspoken but present. The humans had shown time and time again that they were not to be underestimated. Their strategies were chaotic yet brilliant, designed to confound the Empire's superior technology and discipline. They did not engage in open battle in the traditional sense. They struck where and when the Empire was weakest, often bypassing heavily defended worlds to target supply lines or isolated systems. Every Imperial fleet that was sent to deal with the threat had suffered catastrophic losses, and retreat was no longer an option. Sadrath's mind raced with options. He had known that one day a force like this might emerge, but he had believed the Empire's dominance was absolute. There was no room for a new power to rise. And yet here they were, these humans, seemingly out of nowhere, defying everything the Emperor believed to be true. "We will send the Fourth Fleet," Sadrath declared, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "It will be the largest force we have ever assembled. We will crush them. And when they are gone, their entire species will be an example for all who dare defy us." But even as he spoke those words, his confidence faltered. The reports of human victories were too frequent now, their presence too overwhelming. Every battle, no matter how fiercely fought, ended in an Imperial retreat. And worse, the humans seemed to be learning from every encounter, adapting faster than the Empire could respond. There were no easy answers, no quick solutions. The Emperor realized the full weight of the situation. For the first time, the Empire was at a crossroads, not just of military defeat, but of its very survival. The humans were a species born of chaos, and they would not stop until they had brought that chaos to the heart of the Empire. Sadrath stood and paced slowly before his council, his mind turning over every possibility. He had never been one to show weakness, but now, faced with a force that refused to obey the rules of war, he understood that his empire, once so invincible, could be brought to its knees. The time for arrogance was over. "Prepare the Fourth Fleet," he said at last, his voice dark with resolve. "But we will not send it alone. I will join them personally. We will make an example of these humans, and we will do it in such a way that no species will ever dare to challenge us again." But deep in his heart, a question lingered. Could even the full might of the Empire truly stop the human tide? The Fourth Fleet was a symbol of the Empire's strength, an armada of over 200 warships, each bristling with weaponry and designed for absolute domination. Emperor Sadrath, in his overwhelming confidence, ordered the fleet to set course for Phoenix Rim, a strategically vital system on the edge of Imperial space. There, they would face the humans head-on and crush them once and for all. With his personal flagship, the Imperium at the head of the fleet, Sadrath believed victory was all but assured. The humans, after all, were still an unknown force, with only minor successes against smaller Imperial units. They had yet to face the might of the Empire's full military. As the fleet approached Phoenix Rim, the mood was one of quiet anticipation. Officers on the bridge of the Imperium exchanged knowing glances, confident that the Empire's superior numbers and firepower would overwhelm any enemy, no matter how resourceful. However, the moment the fleet crossed into the system's outer limits, the silence was broken by an unexpected signal, a single, calm message from the humans. "This is Captain Thorne of the Aegis *. You are entering restricted territory. Turn back now or face the consequences." There was no response, no sign of negotiation, just a simple warning. The message was unremarkable, yet it sent an eerie chill through the Imperial officers. Who were these humans to speak so boldly, so confidently? They were nothing compared to the glory of the Empire. Sadrath, his face twisted in a sneer, gave the order to advance. Destroy them. No sooner had the command left his lips than chaos erupted. In the blink of an eye, human ships appeared from every direction, sleek, dark silhouettes against the stars. They weren't alone. The humans had been waiting, and the battle unfolded with terrifying speed. The human fleet, composed of only a handful of ships in comparison to the Empire's massive armada, seemed to shift and move with an almost unnatural coordination. They struck with an intensity that left no room for hesitation, no mercy for the Empire's pride. The first volley from the human ships was sudden and devastating. The Imperium itself was struck by a barrage of fire that rattled its outer shields and sent shockwaves through the hull. Sadrath's officers scrambled, trying to get the ship back under control, but it was too late. The human fleet had already moved into position, their strikes coming from unpredictable angles that left the Empire's massive warships vulnerable. No longer did the humans follow the conventional tactics of massed firepower or straightforward maneuvers. They danced around the Empire's ships, launching hit-and-run attacks, targeting weak spots, exploiting every vulnerability. In the distance, an explosion tore through one of the Empire's dreadnoughts, sending debris spinning into space. Another ship vanished in a flash of light as the humans' weapons pierced its defenses. The Empire's once-vaunted fleet, with all its overwhelming might, was being outmaneuvered at every turn. It was as if the human ships were everywhere at once, impossible to track, impossible to defeat. Sadrath's blood boiled as the battle unfolded. This wasn't a fight, it was slaughter. The human ships moved with an eerie grace, launching surprise attacks from all directions, and every countermeasure the Empire threw at them failed. For every Imperial ship that tried to retaliate, another human vessel slipped through their defenses, reappearing elsewhere to strike again. "Hold your positions," Sadrath commanded, but his words fell on deaf ears. The Empire's forces were already in disarray. The once unified armada was splintering under the unrelenting barrage from the humans. Even worse, it was clear that the humans weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival, with a ferocity and adaptability that left the Empire's commanders grasping for answers. At the center of the chaos, Captain Eric Thorne, commander of the human fleet, watched with cold precision as his ships tore through the Imperial lines. He had studied the Empire's weaknesses for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had arrived. The humans had no need to fight in the traditional sense. They simply needed to outlast and outthink their enemies. As the battle raged on, it became clear that they had already won. The Empire's ships were scattered, their morale shattered by the sudden onslaught of unrelenting attacks. With the fleet in tatters, Sadrath's pride began to crack. His commanders were shouting for a retreat, but he refused to accept defeat. He ordered a counteroffensive, but the human fleet had already begun to pull back, vanishing into the darkness of space as quickly as they had appeared. The Imperium was left floating, battered, and wounded, amidst the wreckage of the Empire's once mighty fleet. Phoenix Rim was no longer an Imperial stronghold. It was a testament to the power of the human invaders. For the first time in Emperor Sadrath's reign, he realized that this was no ordinary enemy. These humans were something else entirely, and the Empire's nightmare had only just begun. The aftermath of the Battle of Phoenix Rim left the Empire in shock. The Fourth Fleet, once the pinnacle of Imperial power, had been shattered. Of the 200 warships that had set out, barely a dozen limped back to Imperial space, and many of them were severely damaged beyond immediate repair. The Empire had never suffered a defeat of this magnitude, and whispers of the humans' unstoppable power began to seep into the higher echelons of the Imperial court. Emperor Sadrath, usually composed and in control, now stood on the edge of a precipice. Inside the spire of Anarath, the Emperor's council had gathered in an emergency meeting. Advisors and generals, once eager to bask in the glory of Imperial victories, now spoke in hushed tones, the weight of their failure pressing heavily upon them. Sadrath, seated at the head of the table, his gaze cold and unyielding, listened in silence. His once imposing presence was now tempered by the fear creeping into the hearts of his closest advisors. The Empire had faced countless enemies before, but this was different. "Your Majesty," General Kryn began, his voice steady but cautious, "we must reassess our approach. The humans have shown that they can defeat us. We cannot underestimate their tactics again." Sadrath's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he said nothing. His fingers, resting on the armrests of his throne, twitched as though he were fighting the urge to lash out. "You dare question me, General," he finally said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I am the Emperor. I rule this galaxy. We will not allow a single species to destroy everything we have built." But even as the words left his mouth, a quiet doubt gnawed at his mind. His pride was a weapon, but it was no longer enough to protect the Empire. Sadrath knew that his command over the galaxy rested on the thin thread of his own arrogance. This battle had exposed the Empire's vulnerabilities in ways that could no longer be ignored. "We cannot continue on this path," Captain Drax, an advisor known for his sharp mind and calm demeanor, interjected. "The humans are unpredictable. They don't follow our rules of war. They fight with a fervor and cunning we can't replicate. The Fourth Fleet's loss was not a fluke. It's a sign of a far greater threat, one that cannot be defeated with brute force alone." Sadrath clenched his fists, a vein throbbing at his temple. His generals and advisors were correct, but he would not allow himself to show weakness. "Then we will adapt," he spat, his voice cold. "The Empire does not bend to threats. We will crush them, as we have crushed all others. I will personally lead the next campaign." Captain Drax met the Emperor's gaze, his expression conflicted. "Your Majesty, if we are to succeed, we must learn from these humans. They understand warfare in a way we do not. We must think like them, anticipate their next move, rather than rely solely on our overwhelming firepower. A more strategic approach is needed, not blind force." The room fell silent as Sadrath wrestled with the suggestion. His pride stung at the thought of changing his methods, of admitting that the Empire's way of war might not be enough to defeat the humans. But deep down, he knew that his usual tactics would not work. The humans had already proven that they could outmaneuver the Empire at every turn. And though he refused to show it, the sting of defeat lingered. A plan began to form in Sadrath's mind. If he couldn't beat the humans by sheer strength, he would have to find another way. The Empire's power lay not only in its military might, but in its ability to control resources, to suffocate its enemies by cutting off their access to what they needed. He would starve the humans of their momentum. Sadrath stood abruptly, the decision made. "I will personally oversee the next phase of this war," he declared. "We will not engage them in direct combat, not yet. We will cut off their supply lines, cripple their resources, and make them bleed. We will force them into a position where they will have no choice but to face us on our terms." The room erupted into murmurs of approval. For a brief moment, Sadrath felt a flicker of hope. He could still bend the galaxy to his will. He could still reclaim the Empire's dominance. But the humans, he knew, would not be so easily defeated. They were relentless, and their hunger for victory would not be satisfied by mere tactics or resources. They would fight until the last breath, and Sadrath would have to fight with everything he had if he was to hold onto his throne. As the council meeting drew to a close, Sadrath stood alone at the head of the table, staring out the great windows of the spire. The stars outside seemed to shimmer with an unknown future, one where the Empire might not be the unquestioned ruler of the galaxy. He had underestimated the humans, but that mistake would not be repeated. The war was far from over, and the humans would soon understand just how far the Empire was willing to go to ensure its survival. In the weeks following the disastrous Battle of Phoenix Rim, Emperor Sadrath's resolve hardened. His confidence had been shaken, but he was not one to admit defeat. He had formulated a new plan, one that relied not on the overwhelming might of his fleets, but on strategy, precision, and the Empire's control over the galaxy's vital resources. The Empire's power had been built on its ability to choke out its enemies by cutting off their supply lines and strangling them economically. It was time to apply this same principle to the human invaders. Sadrath called upon his most trusted generals and advisors to oversee a series of covert operations designed to disrupt the human war machine. The Empire's spies had already infiltrated human-controlled systems, and reports indicated that the humans relied on a complex network of supply lines, resources, and hidden bases that, if severed, would cripple their ability to continue their offensive. If the humans could be deprived of the resources they needed to fight, they would be forced to retreat or collapse. Strike at their supply routes, their mining colonies, their factories, Sadrath ordered. We will starve them of everything they depend on. We will not fight them on their terms. We will force them to fight on ours. The plan was set into motion, and soon Imperial saboteurs, special forces units, and Black Ops fleets were deployed throughout the farthest reaches of human-controlled space. The Empire's spies, now embedded deep within human territories, began to sabotage vital infrastructure, destroying factories that produced weapons, cutting off vital trade routes, and targeting the humans' supply depots. Imperial warships, once used for direct confrontation, now executed precision strikes on human outposts, hitting them hard and fast before disappearing into the darkness of space. As the months passed, the humans' forward momentum slowed. Supply lines that once fed their war effort were severed, and essential resources like fuel, ammunition, and food began to dwindle. The human fleet, despite its tactical brilliance, could not survive long without the infrastructure to support it. Imperial spies reported a growing sense of desperation among the humans, a feeling that they were being strangled from all sides. The humans, however, were not without their own ingenuity. Despite the setbacks, they adapted quickly. New supply routes were created, and the human fleet became even more unpredictable. They began to employ guerrilla tactics, attacking Imperial convoys and supply ships with speed and ferocity. It was clear that they had learned from their earlier defeats and would not make the same mistakes again. One such attack took place in the heart of the Empire's territory. A convoy of heavily guarded Imperial supply ships, carrying precious materials for the war effort, was ambushed by a small but highly coordinated group of human ships. The humans struck with blinding speed, using their knowledge of the Empire's routes and tactics to ambush the convoy in a densely packed asteroid field. The Empire's ships were ill-prepared for the sudden attack, and in a matter of hours, the convoy was destroyed. The human fleet vanished into the debris, leaving the Empire's forces scrambling to recover what they could. This defeat sent shockwaves through the Imperial ranks. Despite the damage the Empire had inflicted on the humans, it was clear that the human resolve had not wavered. They had learned from each encounter, growing more dangerous with each battle. And now, with the Empire's supply lines stretched thin, the humans were striking back with a vengeance. Sadrath's advisors were becoming increasingly concerned. "We cannot sustain this war on two fronts," General Kryn said. "The humans are hitting us in ways we never anticipated. They are unpredictable, and they are learning faster than we can adapt." Sadrath, however, refused to back down. "We will not retreat," he declared. "We will finish this. We will bleed them dry until they have nothing left to fight with. If they want a war of attrition, we will give it to them. We will destroy everything they have." Yet even as he spoke those words, doubt lingered in his mind. The humans had shown resilience, ingenuity, and a fierce will to survive. They had not only withstood the Empire's best efforts, but had turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. They were not merely an invader to be crushed. They were a force to be reckoned with. Sadrath knew that to defeat them, the Empire would have to break them, not just militarily but psychologically. It was time to take the fight directly to the human homeworlds, to strike at their very core and show them the true might of the Empire. But as he prepared to move forward with his next phase of the war, the Emperor couldn't shake the growing realization. The humans were no longer just invaders. They were enemies worthy of the Empire's full wrath. And the war was far from over. The Empire's renewed strategy was proving to be both costly and slow. Despite the consistent pressure they had placed on the human supply lines and outposts, the humans were not breaking. Instead, they adapted, evaded, and countered with an ever-growing defiance that seemed to fuel them more with each passing battle. Emperor Sadrath, who had once believed the humans would crumble under the weight of the Empire's might, now faced an undeniable truth: their resolve was unshakable. The turning point came when a daring human fleet, far smaller than the Empire's, launched a direct strike at an Imperial manufacturing planet, Alderaan V, a key production site for Imperial weapons and warships. The attack came without warning, coordinated across several small human ships, and resulted in the complete destruction of the planet's main reactor, causing a chain reaction that obliterated the planet's infrastructure. The Imperial response was swift, but by the time the Empire's fleet arrived, the humans had already vanished, leaving nothing but the burning remnants of their strike. This attack, though small in scale, was the first true spark of rebellion. It was a declaration that the humans were no longer content to simply defend themselves. They were now targeting the Empire's heart, its infrastructure, its very foundation. This wasn't just a war for survival anymore. It was a war for liberation, and the humans would not stop until they had driven the Empire from their worlds. Back at the Imperial capital, Sadrath's rage reached new heights. His eyes, once filled with the certainty of victory, now reflected a burning anger. The humans had dared to strike at the very core of Imperial power, and in doing so, they had awakened something more dangerous than the Emperor had anticipated: a deep, stubborn resolve within the human race. "Do they truly believe they can defeat us?" Sadrath muttered, pacing furiously across the obsidian floor of his war room. "How dare they rise up against us in this way?" General Kryn, who had become the Emperor's closest advisor in the wake of their previous losses, watched quietly. "The humans are no longer just invaders, Your Majesty. They are a movement. They are uniting systems under their cause. We can no longer view them as mere insurgents." Sadrath's fingers curled into fists, his nails digging into his palms. He had underestimated the unity that the humans could summon. Their ability to mobilize, to inspire their people, was unlike anything the Empire had seen. It was clear now that this was no longer a battle of space fleets. This was a fight for the very soul of the galaxy, a war of ideals, and the humans had something that the Empire no longer had: the belief in their cause, in their right to exist and thrive. But Sadrath refused to acknowledge that the humans had the upper hand. "I will crush this rebellion," he hissed, turning to face Kryn. "The human spirit, no matter how strong, is nothing against the might of the Empire. We will break them. I will break them." The next move in the Emperor's campaign was swift and brutal. In an effort to snuff out the rebellion before it could gain more traction, Sadrath ordered a series of strikes on human-controlled systems, targeting civilian populations to force them into submission. His hope was that by terrorizing human colonies, he could destabilize their unity and demoralize their people. The Empire would show no mercy. The human fleet responded with an intensity Sadrath had not expected. They fought not only for their survival, but for their families, their homes, and the future they believed in. With every strike against Imperial targets, the humans became more emboldened. It was as if their every loss only made them stronger. And the more Sadrath attacked, the more the humans unified, rallying around the idea that this war was not just about resistance. It was a war of liberation against an oppressive regime. From the rubble of Alderaan V to the harsh wilderness of Rimworld 6, the humans began to form their own alliances, uniting disparate factions under a common banner. No longer were they scattered groups of rebel forces. They had become a well-organized, disciplined military, with leaders who knew how to inspire and command. Among these new leaders was Captain Eric Thorne, who had risen to prominence after his success at Phoenix Rim. Thorne, more than just a tactician, had become a symbol of the human spirit. His ability to outthink and outmaneuver the Empire was quickly making him a legend. "The Emperor may think he is in control," Thorne said to his crew aboard the Aegis *, "but the truth is, he's only one step away from losing it all. We have them on the run, and they know it. We just need to keep pushing." As the days passed, Thorne's words rang truer than ever. The humans were no longer simply fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. And as each new victory piled on top of the last, they began to realize that their dream of freedom was no longer a distant hope. It was a reality within their grasp. Sadrath, however, could not yet see it. The walls of his imperial palace grew tighter as each setback chipped away at his confidence. The humans, against all odds, were winning. And the more the Empire pressed down upon them, the more determined they became. Sadrath's nightmare had only just begun, and it was one he could not escape. The war had reached its tipping point. The once unstoppable might of the Empire had been reduced to a desperate, cornered beast. Sadrath, whose arrogance had once been his greatest strength, now found himself facing the consequences of his underestimation of the human resolve. The rebels, once seen as scattered insurgents, had become an unstoppable force. Each day brought new reports of human victories, with key Imperial worlds falling one after another to the ever-growing human fleet. The war was no longer just a military conflict. It had become an existential struggle for the survival of the Empire itself. In the heart of the Imperial capital, Emperor Sadrath paced back and forth in his war room, his mind racing as the reality of defeat loomed ever closer. His once glorious fleet, scattered and decimated, was no longer capable of mounting a serious defense against the relentless human advance. The people of the Empire, once fervently loyal, now murmured in the shadows, their faith in the Emperor's leadership waning. The rebellion had sparked a fire of hope across the galaxy, and the Empire's once unshakable grip was slipping away with every passing day. "Your Majesty," General Kryn said carefully, standing at attention before the Emperor, "the human fleet is advancing toward the core worlds. The Aegis is leading them, and it is only a matter of time before they reach us. We can no longer hold them off." Sadrath, his face contorted with frustration and rage, turned to the general. "We will hold. We will make them pay for every inch they take from us." His voice cracked with the weight of his desperation. "We cannot allow them to desecrate the heart of the Empire." But even as he spoke, Sadrath knew deep down that his words were hollow. The Empire's once great fleet was nothing more than a shattered remnant, its power diminished by the humans' relentless campaigns. The vast space stations that once stood as symbols of Imperial dominance were now crumbling under the weight of constant human strikes. The rebellions had spread, inspiring more systems to join the human cause. It was no longer just the human fleet against the Empire. It was an entire galaxy in revolt. In the dead of night, as the final battle for the capital city of Anarath raged, a fleet of human ships broke through the last Imperial defenses. Among them was the Aegis *, led by Captain Eric Thorne, whose victories had made him a living legend. With each victory, the human fleet grew bolder, attacking directly at the Empire's core. Thorne's voice crackled over the comms, steady and resolute. "Sadrath, this is Captain Eric Thorne of the Aegis *. Your reign is over. Surrender now, and we will grant you mercy. Refuse, and we will take everything." Inside the Imperial palace, Sadrath's eyes narrowed, his chest heaving with fury. He would never surrender to the humans, never admit that his empire had been bested by a species he had once considered beneath him. He stood before his war council, now reduced to only a few loyalists, and slammed his fist onto the table. "We will fight to the end. We will never kneel before these invaders." The final battle began at dawn. The human fleet, now augmented by countless allied forces, stormed through the last remnants of the Empire's defense systems. With every ship they destroyed, with every victory they claimed, they took one more step toward the heart of the Empire. The human fighters danced around Imperial warships with impossible agility, outmaneuvering them at every turn, while the human command centers, including the Aegis Asterisk, executed flawlessly coordinated strikes that ripped through the Empire's defenses. On the ground, the city of Anarath was under siege. Imperial troops fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The human resistance fighters, organized and well-supplied, stormed the streets, capturing key installations and bringing down the Imperial stronghold piece by piece. By the time the human fleet reached the palace gates, the Emperor's forces had been utterly decimated. In the final moments of the battle, Emperor Sadrath stood in the ruins of his once glorious palace, staring out at the burning sky as the human forces breached the last of the Imperial defenses. His once proud empire, the symbol of order and power, was crumbling before his very eyes. Captain Thorn and his fleet arrived at the heart of the Imperial palace. The humans had won. The last remnants of the Imperial Guard, no longer able to defend their emperor, were quickly subdued. Thorn approached the emperor, his eyes cold and unyielding, but there was no malice in his gaze, only the weight of inevitability. Sadrath, defeated and broken, looked into the eyes of the man who had brought the empire to its knees. You think you have won. You cannot destroy the empire. It is bigger than you." Thorn shook his head, his voice low. "The empire is not a structure, Sadrath. It's an idea. And ideas, like empires, can be destroyed." With that, the final chapter of the empire's reign came to a close. Sadrath, the emperor who had once ruled with fear and might, was taken prisoner. The galaxy, now liberated, stood on the brink of a new era, one shaped not by the weight of imperial tyranny, but by the hope and resilience of the human spirit. And so, the empire fell.